All right, I'm now going to tell you a story about one of the toughest repairs I ever had. And I sort of told the story once before in an older video, but that's one of the videos that got deleted. Now, my mother had a saying, don't come home with an earring. Don't even bother. Don't come home with a tattoo. Don't come home and tell me you want to become a police officer. Don't come home and tell me you want to work for the post office. And then there was the biggie. Don't ever come home with a motorcycle. Don't ever let me see you on a motorcycle. Okay, that sort of sets the stage. Now, my friends across the street, my neighbors, they all had motorcycles. And I was the guy that troubleshot the electrical system. So now, the two brothers, they go out to Sturgis on their motorcycles. At the time, they had Harleys. Later on, I think they got BMWs that have a reversing gear for parking. Yeah. A motorcycle with a reverse on it. And then sockets for electric jacket and all that. But before those days, they had Harleys. And the one brother had the Harley with the sidecar. Anyway, and the one brother had the electric glide. And this is the old motorcycles. This model had a generator in it. Don't argue with me. It was a generator. That's what makes this story quite unique. Okay? Now, they go out to Sturgis, and the one brother's riding along, and all of a sudden, the generator starts to smoke and get hot. All right. So they're at Sturgis. They go by another generator, and they drop it in the motorcycle, and it doesn't work at all. So now they put the motorcycle on the trailer. Now, whenever they went anywhere with their motorcycles, they always had somebody drive with this trailer. And the trailer's purpose was to bring home the motorcycle that stopped working. So I would get the call, bring your meter. All right, so I go over, and the guy's got the motorcycle there. And I'm checking everything, and I said, let me have the book, the Harley-Davidson book. And I go home, and I read it, and you put the generator in there. It's a generator. It's not an alternator. Now, it also has, here's the parts you have. You have the generator. It's not an alternator. It's a generator. You have this little square box, plastic box. It's a voltage regulator. And you got the battery and a few other wires. Okay? When the motor starts up on the Harley, it's a kickstart. It's not it didn't have a generator, a starter on it. It's just a kickstart bike. Kickstart it, motor starts, it turns to generator. The generator makes DC voltage. The DC voltage gets regulated by the regulator, gets sent to the battery. Okay, so now he puts the generator in that he got from Sturgis, and he kickstarts it. I got the meter. We're getting nothing out of the generator. Nothing. Wyatt took the book home, and I read, and you take one of the leads off the generator, and you have to touch it to the positive of the battery. And you got to make sure you see some current being drawn. And what that does is that creates a residual magnetic field in the generator. So anytime the generator is turned, that residual magnetism will start some output. That output gets fed back to the field coil through that regulator, and you've got the generator putting voltage out. So we touched the lead, thinking this is it, you know. So then we kickstart the motorcycle, and it will run without the generator because it's got the battery. So it runs, and I put the meter on it, and I'm not getting any voltage out of the generator. So he basically says, I must have got a bad generator at Sturgis. So he takes that generator and the old one back to a rebuild guy. And the rebuild guy rebuilds the generator. He brings it home, puts it in, touches the lead, and the motorcycle's working. And that's the rebuild, not the Sturgis one. That one, the guy says, it's a piece of crap, Japanese made or whatever, Chinese made. So that's off the side. So now he's got the Harley-Davidson electric glide running with the old generator. So now it goes a couple days and it dies. So I go over there with my meter again, and he kickstarts it, and there's no voltage is coming out. So he goes and buys a brand new generator, and he puts it in the motorcycle, and he kickstarts it. We tap the wire on the positive. It works. All right, and then the next day he says it's not working. I'm like, okay, so we go back in it. All right, so now I'm ready to give up on electronics, okay? Because we ran that motorcycle for a while with the lights on and the battery, and I'm doing current checks, and there's nothing wrong with it as far as I can tell. And then it shorts out and goes bad. So I'm over at my house, and I'm in my reclining chair, and I'm like, that's it. I've seen enough. I got no clue what's wrong with that motorcycle. All right? And he's ready to go buy another generator. And it's not an alternator, it's a generator. This is a really old motorcycle. So anyway, I'm thinking about it. So I said, maybe you should take the two defective generators back to your rebuild guy and have him just open it up. And he's like, what? I said, ask him if he could just open them up and tell us what failed. So if I know what failed on the generator, I have an idea what I'm doing wrong. Okay? So he takes back to the guy the generator that the guy repaired. All right? Rebuilt. So he takes it back and he tells him the whole story, how like we got this mystical, it just craps out. So the guy opens the generator up and he goes, oh crap. And my friend says, what? He goes, oh, he says, I forgot the insulators. It's got like a braided wire, like a squared piece of braided wire from the brushes to the output of the generator. All right. So what happens is you say, well, why do you need braid? It's a short run. It's only about a half-inch run. And my friend's like, what would that have to do with it? That doesn't need to really be insulated. He goes, not necessarily. He says, on your motorcycle, you got a long bolt that goes through the starter. Now I'm going to say the wrong thing. Through the generator. And he says, yeah. He says, did it ever have a sleeve on it? Like a plastic sleeve? And my friend says, yeah. He says, well, that's the insulator. He says, if you don't have that on the bolt, then the one of the loops of braided wire from the brushes in the generator, remember it's a generator, shorts out to that bolt to ground. And he's like, oh no, really? He goes, yeah. He says, you had that sleeve on there at one time. He says, yeah. He says, if you don't have the sleeve on, then the brushes, the braid from the brushes to the terminals inside the generator has to have like asbestos tubing on it. All right, well, over being rebuilt, and it's got a double, what would you call that? A backup system. So if you get a generator and the braided wire doesn't have an insulator on it, then the bolt with the sleeve will fix it. Now, my friend thought that the sleeve was for vibration, and it is and it isn't. It's also an insulator. So I had told my friend, as soon as you find out from this guy what we burned out, I can get an idea. Well, I don't see him for a few days. So I go over there, and I'm like, knock on the door, like, hey, not for nothing, but what happened? He goes, oh, he says, it wasn't your fault or my fault. He says, the bolt that goes through the generator? I said, yeah. He says, it's supposed to have a sleeve on it. And I left the sleeve off. See, when it went on fire at Sturgis, they real quickly pulled the bolt off to put the new generator in. Well, the new generator couldn't possibly work. Besides the bolt shorting out because he left the sleeve off, the generator needs to be polarized, or you need to put the one lead to the battery that sets up the residual magnetism. So even if you set up the residual magnetism, that generator would have shorted out because the bolt didn't have the insulation on it, and the Chinese generators didn't have sleeves on the braided wire from the thing. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I said to him, I was ready to basically pack it in, because I took the Harley book home and I redrew just the parts and the wires for the generator circuit. Like I said, generator, voltage regulator block that they replaced, I guess the one that had field coils and not an armature, but little contacts in it. And they changed that over the years. You could buy a solid state version. So you have the generator, the solid state regulator, and the battery, and interconnecting wires. And as soon as the motor starts turning the generator puts voltage out. And it goes through the regulator and charges the battery. That's it. There isn't much to this system, you know? But that's what happened, okay? He took, at some point, the sleeve came off the long bolt, and the generators he got after that didn't have the insulator over the braid inside. See, originally when the motorcycle came out, the generators had braid. On the braided wires, they had an insulator. But when he took it back to get it rebuilt, that guy left that off, thinking that the person should know to put a bolt through there with a sleeve on it. And he didn't. But that's some of the wackiest stuff. Okay, that almost did it for me. Now another one was I was at the shortwave store, and this woman gives me one of those lantern, like it's a flashlight, but it's called a lantern. And when you unscrew the front, the battery in there has spring terminals on it. So somebody had given her the flashlight, or lantern as they called them, and they said it doesn't work. So she thought that it just needed a battery, and it was a really nice lantern. So she puts the new battery in there, and then it doesn't work. She gives it to me. I'm hanging out there, and she says to me, "You can have it." So I open it up, and I had a meter there, and I'm checking it out and everything, and I'm like, you know what? Let me put the bulb right across the terminals of the battery, and it dimly lit, and I'm like, let me look at this, and I'm looking at it, and that's years ago, but inside a light bulb, the old light bulb flashlights, each bead in the bulb, there's a bead that separates the two electrodes, the two electrodes that hold the filament, let's put it that way, and they're different colors. And this was a color I never saw before. That's because that bulb was probably a 24-volt bulb. And somebody at some point grabbed the bulb, put it in the flashlight, because the other bulb burnt out. And then when it didn't light, they bought a new battery. That didn't work. She bought a new battery. And then I came along and just say, you know what? Let's eliminate everything. Just take the battery out of the flashlight. And you have spring clips, terminals. You just put the light bulb right directly across it, and you see it lights dimly. And then you put your meter across the battery and see, I don't remember what the voltage those things are, 12, 6, whatever. And it was holding its own, but the light wasn't bright enough. So I told her, and she went digging, and she came in with a light bulb. And I put it in the flashlight, come on. And then she wanted the flashlight back. All right, think about that. That's what people were doing to me. Well, you can have this because it doesn't work. Oh, you fixed it? I want that back. That's my life, okay? But I hope you enjoyed the Harley story, and that's the kind of work I did. I worked on stuff that they gave up on it, and then I would come over with my meter, and that one had me, man. I knew you just turn the generator with the motor. You start the motorcycle will start without the generator. In the old days, there was nothing to it. You could kick-start that motorcycle, and it would start up. Of course, eventually the battery will go down on you, but you could start it up. And you can put your meter across the generator. You can disconnect the circuit from the lights and everything, and you have no voltage being generated. So you're like, this is impossible. But you know, when you read the manual, it says, oh, you have to put the terminal on the positive of the battery. Now I understood what that was, because one time our instructor in Reds, he mentioned when you go to the generator house and you start up the generator, you have to, there's a magnet somewhere on the generator, and it's set a certain way that you would slide it in this hole, and then you'd hear the generator come up, or the alternator. Actually, it might have been a generator. Anyway, you hear it come up, and I'm like, why? And he couldn't answer me. My instructor couldn't answer me. Well, there's residual magnetism in the metal of the generator, but it diminishes. Remember I told you on one of the other videos that magnetism is sort of like radioactivity. It decays over a period of time when it's a crappy magnet. In case of this generator that he's trying to restart, the magnetism doesn't stay in the field coil and the metal of the generator. So on the side, there's this little thing. You pull this magnet out and you put it in this hole, and then that's enough residual magnetism to start the field from going. And once the field gets going, it goes to the regulator. And a lot of those old regulators are actually relays that click on and off. They didn't have solid state stuff. They didn't have even tube stuff. And the regulation was done with contacts and like relays. And you'd hear the generator come up. But that teacher, I don't know. Maybe you don't know. What was that magnet doing? I don't know. I don't know. You just have to stick it in this hole, and it comes up. And then the other thing too is he didn't know how fluorescent light worked. He got really pissed at me. I said, I was asking a question because I had a problem, and he goes, I don't know everything or something like that real quick. But that's another thing you want to look at: how old fluorescent lights work, what the ballast does, what the starter does. So you watch people. You can have a killer bulb, or a killer starter, or a killer ballast, and you can run yourself in circles. And a killer ballast shorts out, but maybe after 3 hours. So you put a new bulb in it, a new starter, and you're happy as a clam. And you walk away, and now a couple hours later you come back and the light's out, and the filament in the fluorescent lights burnt out. I know a lot of you go, there's no filament in a fluorescent bulb. Yeah, there's one on each end, and that heats the gas so it'll start. That's what that glowing is on the ends. And there are fluorescent lights that don't have those filaments, and they were self-starters. The ballast was different. And then there's ones that there's a thing in the ballast instead of a starter, and they can go bad. There's a whole nightmare with a fluorescent light. And a lot of people will change the starter, and they think they're home free. Meanwhile, the bulb is going bad, and when the starter comes on, it stays on too long, which kills the starter. So you get a killer bulb, killer starter, killer bulb. And if you don't change both at the same time, if the ballast is good, you'll go back and forth. There's a lot of things that aren't as simple as you think they are. All right? And when you analyze stuff, you put dates on your fluorescent bulbs. And a fluorescent bulb, years ago, you could get about 9 years of service out of it. And if you're changing the bulb every 1.5 years, you got a bad ballast or a bad starter. Okay? It's that simple. And with LED bulbs, things have really gotten simpler. And I think that's it. All right, that's it.